Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Phil.
We're the hosts of Science Fiction 101.
It's a show which gets to the heart of science fiction. Books, films, TV. We've covered Star Trek,
Doctor Who,
Star Wars.
We love to explore the past, present, and future of science fiction.
And we'd love for you to join us
on Science Fiction 101.
Hi Colin.
Hi Phil.
Today we have our report from the Worldcon, because Colin attended in Glasgow. And you'll also hear about Colin and Phil coming this close to meeting in London. And we'll be challenged to a fiendish quiz by a friend of the show. So how was Scotland, Colin?
Scotland was wonderful. The Worldcon, I can't say enough good things about the team that ran it, the volunteers that were there, the speakers that came, the moderators, the wonderful hosts who took care of the technical issues for, it must have been 5 to 6 rooms all at the same time. Wow. With local recording, remote guests, all kinds of things.
Amazing. So we'll have a full report on that later on in the show. Just a quick catch-up first on messages received from listeners. Last time, of course, we were talking about 2 women writers who we were afraid were going to disappear into obscurity if we didn't do something to stop it. So that was Zena Henderson and Pauline Ashwell. And it was quite pleasing to see the number of people who had read Zena Henderson. I still haven't heard from anyone who's read Pauline Ashwell before, but some people said they would give it a go, having heard our podcast and our enthusiasm. My enthusiasm for the book. Andy said, I'm definitely going to read these stories, so thanks. And then he says, I might wait for the Audible version with Phil narrating. It was a great accent, but I wouldn't try it down the old rub-a-dub-dub in the East End. So he's talking there about my Cockney accent that I that I demonstrated last time. Do you know what a rub-a-dub-dub is, Colin?
No.
It's Cockney rhyming slang. Rub-a-dub-dub, pub.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm just going down a rub-a-dub-dub. I'm going down a pub. What else do we have in Cockney rhyming slang? Apples and pears. Do you know what apples and pears are?
Aside from products that Oregon grows, no.
Yeah, aside from that, yeah. Yeah, if you're a Cockney, you might say, I'm just going up the apples and pears to bed. Because apples and pears, stairs. See, this is how this...
So you rhyme the last word with something that you're going to do.
Yeah.
And people, almost like the Star Trek episode, Darmok, you're pulling things out of context. And
Yeah. It works on the assumption that the person you're talking to also knows the kind of code that you're using, but if they don't, there's at least a chance they can guess. But the strange thing with Cockney rhyming slang is that it's usual to drop the bit that rhymes. So apples and pears means stairs, but what you might actually say is, I'm just going up the apples, meaning I'm just going up the stairs. So it requires you to know that apples and pears means stairs, and that apples is short for apples and pears. It's crazy. Oh, and the trouble. I had a word with me trouble. Do you know what that is?
A word with me trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to guess it's wife, but
it is.
How does that rhyme with wife, though?
Trouble and strife, wife.
Trouble and strife.
Yeah. So I just had a word with me trouble. And she said, go up the apples and you'll find it up there.
You've been spending too much time in the rub-a-dub.
Yeah. We also heard from Linda, who was equally scathing of the idea of a Doctor Who Star Trek crossover. She said, I'm with Phil. Those are 2 totally different universes. But she went on to say, I have been wishing for the Doctor to cross over into the long-running German cop show, and here I get to show off my German, Alarm für Cobra 11. Which I have no idea what that is. I mean, she gave a link and I clicked through and I'm not really any the wiser. But she says, Hauptkommissar Zemir Gerkan has gone through almost as many partners as the Doctor has gone through companions. So there we go. Doctor Who crossing over with a German TV show. That would be fun. And finally, we heard from Sue, who said, "A lovely episode, gents. Francha and Jemmy and Bethy appear in other Zena Henderson stories, and the tales about how the people got to Earth, how some managed to find each other again, and the humans they met are all riveting, but also gentle somehow." So thanks, Sue. Clearly, Sue has read more than one of the Zena Henderson stories, and that's great to know that there are still Zena Henderson readers out there. Sue did also point us towards WorldCat, which is the online library catalogue which can help you find library copies of books wherever you are. So if your local library doesn't have a particular book, you can go on WorldCat, find out where copies exist, and you could take that information to your local librarian and say, "Look, here's a copy of the book. It's in Edinburgh or Paris or whatever," and they might be able to help you get a copy shipped to you from one library to another. So thanks for pointing that out, Sue. So, onto our main feature, Worldcon in Glasgow. The World Science Fiction Convention was held in Glasgow, Scotland this year, and our roving reporter Colin Kuskie was there. So I believe this was your first time at a Worldcon. Was it your first time at a convention as well?
I have attended conventions infrequently over my life. The first one I ever went to was work-related. I went to one of the IEEE conventions.
Oh, right, yeah.
The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers.
Yeah.
I've been to some church conferences talking about leadership and leadership development. Mm-hmm. And I have gone to several open source conventions related to the programming language that I've used in all of my jobs for 29 years now.
Wow, yeah.
This was my first science fiction convention and my first Worldcon.
So as a sort of a first-time attendee, did you feel welcome, or did you feel a bit lost at the scale of it all?
It was definitely the largest convention I think I'd ever been to. Yeah. And again, kudos to the people that designed the software for managing the program and presenting it in a way that you can read and make some sense of, because there were 3 different buildings on campus with all their own naming schemes, with sometimes overlapping times. So you might want to go to 2 different things, but they overlap by half an hour.
Yeah, I've experienced similar things not with conventions, but with conferences, academic conferences, where there is a tendency to have multiple parallel strands running, and that's always one of the frustrations, is that the panels you want to attend clash with the ones that you are participating in, and that kind of thing. So that was one of the advantages of the pandemic times, when lots of events shifted to being entirely online, because then it was possible for the first time to attend parallel conferences, because you could attend one in real time rather, and you could watch another one as a recording later. So I wish all conferences and conventions had shifted permanently to that kind of model, but it doesn't always work out that way.
No, and I think that several of the sessions were recorded will be available online for a while.
Yeah, and in fact I watched part of the Hugo ceremony online because that was made freely available. But some of the other events, I assume, will just be available to people who were members of the convention.
Yeah. If you watch that and you don't have a lot of time, I would highly recommend watching John Scalzi's overview of the history of the Hugos.
Yeah.
And Ursula K. Vernon's acceptance speech for Thornhedge for best novella. I really enjoyed those.
What was special about her speech?
She is just a character.
Okay.
She kind of came up and talked about, Thornhedge for a little bit. And then we had an extended lecture about the physiology of the sea cucumber. So she's a horror writer. She does a really good job of making horror approachable, because my wife, who does not like thrillers and horrors, has been reading all of her books one after the other. And every time she brings a new one home from the library, I'm really happy and surprised that she continues to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently she had a run-in with the Hugo administrator from the 2023 Hugos, who was not allowed to come on site, and proceeded to give him a very large piece of her mind about the things that happened last year.
Yeah. What would you say were your personal highlights of the convention?
Oh, the Hugo Awards were definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Listening to Mary Robinette give live readings of her upcoming works.
Right.
Because I enjoy her writing so much. This next one takes a bit of explanation, and if it runs long, give me a holler. 10 years ago, the movie Interstellar was made by Jonathan Nolan.
Yeah.
And the guy who did the soundtrack, Hans Zimmer,
yes,
wanted a pipe organ as part of the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Just to evince that mood and that feel. And so they went to London, and they went to a couple of different churches that have pipe organs, and one church did not allow secular music or secular events on site. The other one did, but it had too much road noise, so they went to a third church, and this church has an organist named Roger Sayer, and he performed the soundtrack for Interstellar 10 years ago. So fast forward 10 years, and for the anniversary of Interstellar, he has developed this 2-hour show that he's taken across Europe and London, where he will play a local pipe organ, and there's a little 20-minute documentary about the history of how Interstellar was made and what's the pipe organ and how that was all involved. And then he does a little QA, and then he plays some live pipe organ music.
Oh, terrific.
And that show was done at the Worldcon at Glasgow with an electronic organ, which is just not quite the same. But it was wonderful. And we actually got to talk to him, my son, Tim, and I, and Seth afterwards, and, told him how much we enjoyed the performance, and, talked about more things. And then he asked us where we were from, and we said, we're from Oregon in Northwest United States. And he goes, I've never been there. If you guys had access to a pipe organ in a venue, I might be interested in coming out that way. Well, I think I'm now an ex-musician, and I know people in the biz. And so I've been tracking down a pipe organ and a site, and I don't know if it's actually going to happen or not, but I would love for him to come out here to see the Northwest, especially in the fall, which is one of the best times of the year to be here.
Yeah.
And to share that with the people of Portland.
Wow. He didn't do the entire score, did he, with the film playing alongside?
No, that would have been incredible. He played several sections from Holst's The Planets, and then several segments out of the soundtrack itself.
Right.
One of my other favorite talks was about parasocial relationships. Which is this idea that because you read somebody's books or you follow their blog or listen to their podcast, that you feel like you have a connection to them.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And it's very one-sided because, one, the person creating the content is sometimes performing. They're different people, more of a person than what you hear or read or watch.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So these authors came up and talked about some of the struggles they've had with parasocial relationships, and how to learn how that relationship actually works, and some of the negative side effects that they've had in their lives and careers because of it.
I was assuming when you first mentioned it that it was sort of talking to fans about having some understanding of what it is they are doing when they are following somebody, following an author or whatever, but to actually have it from the point of view of the followee rather than the follower. That's interesting. Yeah.
And in fact, John Scalzi sat on that panel, and afterwards he wrote a very long online essay, which we can drop a link to if people are curious, saying that you should never idolize anybody online. And then going to talk about why, and then in particular, why you should never idolize him.
Yeah. Did you get to go outside of the convention and see much of Glasgow or Scotland?
We took time off Sunday morning to go play some disc golf, because that's what Seth and James and I do with our kids, and that was a lot of fun. I got to, from our hotel to the SEC, you could either take a train ride or you could do a half-hour-long walk along the river, which was just beautiful. But really, I was there in Glasgow to attend the conference, and I went to, I think, 11 or 12 different sessions.
You found that there was enough on the schedule for you to attend lots of scheduled events rather than just, say, wandering around the I don't know, the dealer's room or whatever.
I did a little bit of that as well. Some of that was planned. Some of that was unplanned. If you're going to one of these events, one of the things I would recommend is try to guess, if you can, at the popularity of the thing you want to attend. And the more popular you think it is, the more time you want to queue up before it starts. They have limited resources, and they're also trying to guess which ones are popular and not. And there were several times where they had to close the rooms because they were full, and local regulations would not allow you just to stand in the back or do other things. Yeah.
I don't know whether I should go there really, but I hear you were ill after the convention.
Yeah. So we planned an extended family vacation after the convention. It was from Glasgow to Edinburgh, then down to London. And when I got to Edinburgh, I became very sick with an intestinal bug. And so I saw a little bit of Edinburgh and got on the train to go to London, and then saw the inside of my hotel room for 4 days.
And this, dear listener, brings us to the story of how Colin and I didn't meet in London. Because we planned to meet. People won't know this, but I live about 2 hours train journey from London. So it's slightly easier for me to get to London than it is to get to Glasgow. So we'd arranged that we would meet in London. And we were going to have this very conversation about the convention, and just sit in a park and record it in the August sunshine of London. But we never did, because Colin fell ill, and no way did I want to catch any of the convention bugs that he'd gone down with.
Yeah. And then day 3, I was in London. Then I came down with COVID.
Oh, yeah. One thing after another.
So it's probably a good thing that we didn't try to meet, because we would not have been close enough to a bathroom, and I would have hated to give anything of what I went through to you.
Oh, yeah. Although, strangely, my idea of trying to record a podcast in the great outdoors is a bit like COVID times, when I don't know what it was like where you are, but in the UK, there was a time during the pandemic where you weren't allowed to meet other people except outdoors. You were allowed to meet them in a park, but you weren't allowed to have people coming into your house. It was literally illegal to do that kind of thing. So maybe I had an inkling. I didn't.
Well, we did have an emergency backup plan for it was a little room in a library, but it was so small with glass walls, I was afraid it was going to be all echoey. So the outside recording really was the better option.
Yeah. Presumably you didn't get to do any tourist stuff in London.
I got better enough on Saturday, and it was before the COVID really set in. It was just a scratch in my throat, where we took an Uber boat ride and went to a museum. And that was about all I could do that day.
Which museum did you go to?
The Prime Meridian Museum, and that's not the proper name for it.
Greenwich?
Yeah, the Greenwich Observatory.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great place. Yeah, I've been there a number of times.
So I actually saw all 3 prime meridians.
Can you explain?
Yeah. Over time, our measurement ability became more and more accurate. And so the things that they were lining on actually moved. And so you can see where it was here, and then it was about 8 to 10 feet to the right, and then it moved less the last time. And they've kind of left it there for now.
Did you, I know on the schedule you were due to do a Take Me to Your Reader podcast. Did that go ahead?
Yeah, it did go ahead. And we had about 8 people in attendance. Oh. It was in the night, and it was opposite a whole bunch, a live performance, I think, of the orchestra.
Oh, yeah. So
we had, my son Tim came, and the people from, I think it was Hugo's Girl came.
Yeah.
And then we had Damo came, which was cool to meet him. And Andy Perry came, and it was really cool to meet him and all of his fiendish quiz creation in person. And then Ivor Watkins also came.
Excellent.
So yeah, met some people in real life. And in fact, we sat next to Damo for the Hugo Awards and got to know him. He's a super cool guy. Yeah, he's a college maths professor.
Oh, really? I have no idea. Well, we have some very intelligent listeners. We know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we talked science fiction. I asked him some local politics questions, and because, the struggles that have been going on in the UK for leadership pretty much mirror what's been going on in the United States the last 8 years, and coming up to that again and hoping not to repeat the 4 year ago section.
Yeah.
So very interesting.
Yeah. Having sat in a reading with Mary Robinette Cole going through her latest work, I'm assuming you hadn't heard her read before, but maybe you had. What was that like? Does the work feel different when she's reading it to when you're sort of reading it in your own head?
Well, she's a fairly accomplished audiobook performer. And so she'll do different accents. At one point she was doing the voice of someone on a public address system. And so she pulls this little cup out. And then she's talking into... I have a little cup here, and it's not working anywhere.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was talking into that for her public address system, and then she would talk about the history of some of the things. Like, well, this section was really inspired by this, and I'm hoping to do this with it. And it was almost like an annotated reading.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And then she found out that there was no one else in the room after her. And so she did a second just ad hoc reading from another piece she's developing. And it was completely different in tone. So the first piece was from her Lady Astronaut universe, and it's an upcoming short story from the anthology, which she just kickstarted.
Yeah.
The next piece, and I kind of remembered briefly the plot and some other things, but I don't remember if this is a full novel or if it's a short story or when it's coming out, or even if she has a buyer for the work. I think it's something she's just developing because she's passionate about it.
Yeah, very good. And the Hugo ceremony, I watched some of that online, but I didn't watch all of it. But afterwards I quickly went online just to see who had won. And of course they would have covered the short fiction that we had reviewed in a previous episode. So how did that turn out?
Oh, I thought it turned out very well because I'm a fan of Naomi Kritzer, and seeing her take not only the short story but the novelette category for that wonderful story that we read almost a year ago, The Year Without a Summer, I thought was... I liked that choice. I guess that's probably the best thing to say.
Yeah. So she won 2 Hugos, so in a way she's the star of the night, really. Was she actually there?
She was.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, she joins very rare company. There are only 5 people that have won 2 awards in 1 year of the Hugos for 2 different kinds of media.
Right.
Connie Willis is one. George R.R. Martin is one.
Yeah.
I think Gordon Dixon is one. And I'm not remembering who the other 4th person is, but they should be lauded for that accomplishment.
Yeah. I did also see, as part of the Hugo ceremony, that I can't remember who it was, but one of the presenters in the early section had the first Hugo, which was, I think it was it was awarded to Forrest J. Ackerman back in the 50s, but I think he rejected it. I think that's the story. He didn't want it.
Yeah,
because he thought he didn't deserve it, but it survived, and I think it was recently auctioned, wasn't it? And they physically had it there as part of the ceremony, and it got a round of applause when he sort of unveiled it.
Yeah, there was a display, and I think it's from the World Science Fiction Society, and that's where that Hugo Award has ended up.
Ah, okay. So you got to see multiple Hugos sort of as part of a setting.
Yeah. There was a nice display of not a lot of them, not one for every year, which would have been really cool. But yeah, many of them, just to see how they've changed over time and how they pick a new artist every year to design the base to make it special for whatever location is working on it. And
of course, commiserations to our friend Seth Easley, who was shortlisted for the I forget what the category is, but it was for his podcast Hugo's there. And unfortunately he didn't win, but even being on the shortlist is an amazing achievement. And there's still time, he's keeping that podcast going. And,
yes, he is.
Keep building that audience. But of course, inexplicably, we weren't even on the long list, Colin. What's going on there?
I don't know. I have a feeling that we aren't reaching people who attend Hugo sessions.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's okay. Take Me to Your Reader has a couple of base rules that we've learned over the 10 years of doing it. And one is that we never write a script. The second one is we kind of do what we want to do.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, there will be something that isn't exactly science fiction, but is adapted that we want to cover.
Yeah.
I think there are plans, not for the short term, to do a work that we really, really wish was adapted. And we're going to find a book that is close to it in scheme and cover the two.
Yeah.
And the third one is that we do it for ourselves because we enjoy it and we have fun doing it.
Yeah. And I think that's the best answer to give. I have 2 podcasts, you have 2 podcasts. People say, why do you do it? Because I like doing it. I enjoy doing it. The day I stop enjoy doing it, the podcast will end. But no, I do it for the fun of it. And if people enjoy listening to it, that's great as well. And I guess if we didn't have any listeners, we probably wouldn't have carried on. But no, it's fun to do, and it's fun to get the response from listeners.
Yeah.
So that's the real award, isn't it?
Having listeners that appreciate us?
Yes.
That is nice.
Yes. Yes.
Speaking of doing things we enjoy, one of the things that I was really surprised by, in every single session that I went to, somebody was knitting or crocheting.
Ah.
I noticed it once and I went like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's a nice way to occupy your hands while you're paying attention to someone talking.
Yeah.
And then it kept happening. And then I started counting. And this is maybe something that I should have realized, because one of the shops in the dealer's hall was a yarn shop, because you're not going to just show up at a convention with yarn if you don't think you're going to sell enough to make it worth your time to be there.
Yeah. So it must be a thing.
Yeah.
Well, one of the cliches of science fiction fandom, I mean, the classic one is that all science fiction fans are nerds, which may or may not be true. But another cliche is the sort of science fiction cat lady, that...
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know. No disrespect intended there.
Well, and to be honest, a lot of the authors are as well. Mary Robinette Cole came in costume to her reading, and it was an Elma York flight suit.
Oh, wow.
And for her recent Kickstarter, where she's kickstarting an anthology of the short stories in the Lady Astronaut universe, one of the stretch goals was yarn, custom dyed in the colors of the logo for the Lady Astronaut universe.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of the bigger stretch goals, and I think it actually helped them reach it. So, and she has cats. And so I'm not sure that the old, crazy cat lady moniker holds these days. You can have the extremely intelligent, successful cat lady.
Yeah.
And they're okay too.
Well, maybe there's a new hobby for you there. Maybe you could take up the knitting or the crocheting, and then next time you go to a convention, you can join in.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. I would not be taking up a new hobby if I did that. I used to do those things back in the day.
Well, there you go.
My mom was desperate to find things to help me manage my energy. We lived kind of out in the country, didn't have a lot of neighbors. And so high energy kids squabble a lot. And they squabble less if they have latch hooks or if they learn how to crochet and do other kinds of things. But I haven't done that in a number of years.
Yeah. Well,
I'd probably have to learn it all over again.
I too did a little bit of knitting when I was little, but one thing I could never do was cast on or cast off. So I always had to get my mum to start, and then I could knit. And then when I got to the end of the scarf, because that's all I could knit was a scarf, I had to get my mum to cast off at the end. Would you do it again? Would you go to more conventions now? Or has this experience put you off?
Well, I have this sneaking suspicion that Seth may be nominated again. And I honestly hope that you and I get to join him. We'll find out as time goes by. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I hang out with Seth and James. And my sons enjoy science fiction. And my wife is tolerant of science fiction and enjoys it at a certain level too.
Yeah.
But this was like being in an my own little city of 3,000 people of science fiction fans. And you could casually talk with people like I did at lunch one day, and I told them about our podcast, what science fiction they like and what they don't like, and how they've been coming to conventions or not, and what they're going to do and what might be interesting to see. One of the things I learned going to the open source convention is that there's a difference between going to the sessions with topics that interest you and going to the sessions that are the best moderated with the best speakers.
Right, yeah.
And after experience, I would trade, the things that might really interest me for that second one because of the enjoyment of hearing these people talk with passion on topic with their own specific knowledge that you might not really think would be interesting.
Yes.
There's a topic I went to that was reading classic science fiction, which we really kind of evolved into. How do you read science fiction when the people who wrote it, you learn, I guess, aren't very nice?
Yeah.
To be a broad topic.
Yes, they're bad people kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was this great discussion about the art versus the artist, if the person's opinion, if it's part of the art, if it's used, to be demonstrative. Like if someone wrote about racism, which is, a fairly large topic in science fiction, racism, speciesism, other kinds of things. Few people embody that ideal in their life and then write about it as an endorsement. And so that's very different than having, an antagonist who's a racist or what have you. So that was really interesting.
Very good. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed the thing. I'm really sorry that you got ill as a result. I have to say that it's one of the most common things to hear after conventions and conferences is that people have gone down with the conference lurgy.
Yeah, concred.
So, yeah. So it's really a real shame to hear that. But hey, there will be future opportunities, I'm sure, for us to... I've got a cap here, and it says on it, Science Fiction 101, Colin and Phil. And I was going to give you this when we met in London. Well, I mean, I've got one for me as well. But, so I might send that to you at some point, or if other opportunities arise, for us to meet somewhere else, then we can do that. But thank you for being our roving reporter at the Worldcon.
Oh, you're welcome. That was a lot of fun.
Good. So we're joined for our quiz segment by Peter Kuskie, who appeared on the show way back in episode 11 when we reviewed the Apollo murders. Yeah, that was years ago.
Yeah, that was.
Welcome back, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about this horrible, ghastly quiz that you did.
The first idea for this quiz was science fiction stories that were inspired by real-world locations, but I could not find enough stories to fully make a quiz. So this one is science fiction stories, including books and movies that were inspired by real-world events and locations.
Okay.
Also want to give a very, very big shout out to Seth Heasley, who helped with the play testing and also writing better hints for this. So the way this is going to work is I'm just going to give you a real world event or location, and then you guys are going to try and tell me what science fiction story that inspired, or was partially inspired, or was inspired by it.
Now, are we in competition with each other, or are we helping each other out?
I figure helping each other out would be good.
Okay.
Right on. 2-on-1. We've got him, Phil.
Yes. So the first one is the Oregon coast, specifically near Southern Oregon.
You know this one, Phil?
Not from that. No, I'd probably need more of a clue.
Okay, so the area that this story is inspired by is very sandy.
Very sandy.
Yes. This is Oregon Apocrypha. So if you're a science fiction person in Oregon, this is something that you know. It's Dune.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the story was inspired by writing an article about the battle that the city of Florence was having with encroaching sand dunes, and ended up being inspired by seeing these vast expanses of dunes. Took several photography flights over the area. The library in Florence, I believe, has a large collection of his writing materials and other things that inspired him to help write Dune.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, the dune area is so big that you approach it from a road, and after you climb over the first dune or two, all you can see in every direction is sand.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we still got a point there, Colin, because you knew. So we're doing well.
That's one.
All right. The second question is Jill Tarter, who is a SETI researcher.
Well, she is the inspiration for the protagonist of Contact by Carl Sagan.
That is correct. Well done,
Hooray.
Phil. Yeah. Yeah, it was adapted into a 1997 movie. I couldn't find how much influence she played on the main character in the book, but she definitely was a very large inspiration for the adaptation of the character for the movie, and even served as a science consultant on the film, working with Jodie Foster.
Ah,
Third one, this is probably one of the easier ones as well, is the dropping of the atomic bomb.
we're talking science fiction films, are we?
Science fiction films.
So we can't say Oppenheimer. Doctor Strangelove?
No, not the one I'm thinking of. So the first hint is what possible effects could radiation have on flora and fauna?
Okay, so it's not something like On the Beach either.
No.
Okay.
So are we talking about mutations?
Of a certain kind, yes.
Mutations of a certain kind.
Yes. This was a movie originally. Was first released in 1954.
It's not the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, is it?
No,
Is it Godzilla?
it is Godzilla.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yes. Apparently, the director served in the Japanese Imperial Army, I believe, and was traveling through the area shortly after the first bomb was dropped and saw the devastation and used that as inspiration for helping shoot the first film as well. The original release of the film played very heavily into the motif of the atomic bombs, but subsequent releasings in the United States and also further adaptations, particularly by more Western media, heavily downplays that for some odd reason. This is my favorite hint. Being drunk in a field with a travel guide.
Oh, I think I know what that must be.
Being drunk in a field with a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah.
That is very much correct. Yes.
Being drunk.
Very British thing to do.
Yeah, so the story behind this is that Douglas Adams was hitchhiking from London to Istanbul, and while drunk and laying in a field, he looked up to the stars and thought that someone should write the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is the most fitting way for somebody to come up with the concept of that book ever.
Now, to get from London to Istanbul, you can't do like a classic American hitchhiking where you're on the side of a road with your thumb because there's no road. So he must have taken a boat at some point.
Yeah, once you've got from the UK to mainland Europe, you can do it. The tricky bit is getting across the English Channel, but you can do that. You can hitch a lift, and the vehicle that you hitch a lift with gets on the ferry. You travel across to the other side, and then you get back in your vehicle and carry on driving. So,
Oh.
yeah, it's entirely possible. Yeah.
Next one is UFOs over Southern California in 1942.
Oh, goodness. This is a movie?
This is a movie released in 2011.
Ah, right. Okay. That's what I was going to ask. Is the movie from way back when?
Very recent-ish, 13 years ago?
Yeah.
Is that Independence Day?
No. Starring Aaron Eckhart, Michelle Rodriguez, and Michael Pena.
It didn't do very well in the box office. It's not well regarded. It's a great action movie. It's Los Angeles.
It's Battle Los Angeles, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, there's an alternate title. I don't remember what the alternate title was. So this movie was inspired by a rumored attack on Los Angeles on February 24th, 1942, by Japanese forces. Eyewitnesses and radar detected several aerial objects near LA. The U.S. Army returned fire, but nothing was ever found. And the Japanese Army has no idea what we're talking about.
UFOs.
UFOs.
Must be aliens. Can't possibly be anything else.
Yes. The next question is a future filmmaker seeing a meteor shower as a kid.
Well, I think we should start speculating on who the future filmmaker might be. Is it Spielberg?
It is Spielberg.
So are you thinking Close Encounters or E.T.?
Close Encounters,
Yeah.
surely.
That's correct. Close Encounters. The hint from Seth for this one was an encounter with meteors is just the first of several kinds of encounters.
Oh,
Yeah, Steven Spielberg was inspired by the meteors flashing across the sky when he saw the meteor shower in New Jersey with his dad. He says he was filled with this sense of awe and a little bit of was a little terrified because his dad just woke him up and said, "Hey, we're going to go out to this field," and then just saw the meteor shower happening.
I wonder if he saw killer sharks as well when he was a kid.
Yeah, so interesting tidbit I learned is that meteor showers and shooting stars have a appearance in a lot of his films, kind of just as a motif in general. The first time I believe he had one was in Jaws, actually, and that one was purely coincidental.
Huh.
Oh,
At night on the boat where they're loading the gun or something. I don't remember exactly. I'm sorry about that. Here's a good one. The passage of Halley's Comet in 1910.
Passage of Halley's Comet in 1910. If this inspired the creation of something, was the person alive at the time?
They were definitely alive and writing other things as well around this time period.
So was this H.G. Wells?
This was not H.G. Wells.
Jules Verne?
Nope. Here's the first hint. It deals with the concept of Earth being infected after passing through the comet trail.
Oh,
And this is a idea that has been used several times in science fiction, I believe.
That can't be. Is it Day of the Triffids?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, it's probably too early.
Let me phrase that differently. That is not the answer. I don't know if Day of the Triffids was inspired by this as well.
Okay, so we're looking for an author who was alive in 1910 with the Earth being infected.
Most of the hints are about the identity of the author, so let me give you the first one.
okay.
Don't hound me for more hints.
Hound of the Baskervilles?
Keep going.
Arthur Conan Doyle?
That is correct. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and the book is The Poison Belt. He was believed to have been inspired by comments made by French astronomer, and I'm going to butcher this name, Camille Flammarion, about how gases in the comet's tail might possibly snuff out all life on the planet. And after that very reasonable, matter-of-fact statement, there was a huge panic about people staying inside, shuttering windows, and doing the usual end of Earth approaching stuff.
Wow, I'm going to look that up afterwards because I've not heard
Yeah,
of
I
it.
mean, maybe we should do like an old deep dive because I think when you say Arthur Conan Doyle, everyone thinks he only wrote detective stories.
Yes.
He did also write The Lost World, which has been adapted to movies countless times. So even if people don't realize the connection, the connection is there.
I believe this book is technically in the same world as The Lost World.
Oh,
Same universe, because I believe several characters from that book make an appearance in The Poison Belt.
yeah, that would probably be Professor Challenger then.
Yes, I wish I remember the names. I should have written that down. Yes. The other hints, perhaps IBM's Watson could help you with this answer.
Oh, Watson. Mm.
The final hint is once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, we have 2 questions left. The connection of this one is apparently heavily disputed among scholars, but I figured I'd throw it in. The 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora.
I'm going to ask a similar question to the last one.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a writer who was around in 1815.
Yes. The first hint is that the eruption resulted in the year without a summer and fairly crap weather for Northern Europe.
1815. That's
Yes.
too late to have inspired Frankenstein.
But didn't she write another book?
Well, she did. Is it The Last Man?
The connection between the eruption and the year without a summer and the creation of this book is heavily disputed. This was the writer being forced to stay inside. So the writer traveled someplace and then wrote this as an inspiration because they wanted to tell better ghost stories.
Well, that does sound like Frankenstein.
It is Frankenstein. So the connection is that it's a little ambiguous whether the year without a summer or I believe it was one of the Napoleonic Wars, incentivized Mary Shelley, her sister, and Percy Shelley to travel to Geneva, where they rented a villa next to Lord Byron. And struck up a friendship, and after a while, they were telling ghost stories. And Lord Byron, I believe, challenged everyone there to write a better ghost story. And after several nights of writer's block, she created the basis of Frankenstein.
Wow.
Because I didn't believe a word of that, I've just looked it up, and Frankenstein came out in 1818. I thought it was 1813,
Yeah.
so I was off.
Well,
So,
the numbers 3 and 8 do look kind of similar, so I got you on that. All right, and the final question. This should be a good one. Is the Tunguska event?
That, I believe, was in 1910 or 1908 or something.
I believe so.
And again, are we talking about somebody who was there at the time?
I do not know, but the event plays very heavily into the basis of the novel.
Is it when worlds collide?
No. So the first hint is the event is an encounter with a near-Earth object.
An encounter with a near-Earth object. So we're talking a book?
Yes, this is a book.
Has it ever been a film?
Not that I'm aware of. So the Tunguska event is directly referenced at the beginning of the novel, and a similar event inspires the world to create an organization tasked with observing extraterrestrial phenomena.
And is it possible that Phil and I were on a podcast or two on different podcasts talking about this book?
I believe, yes, you did.
Does that give you a hint, Phil?
No.
Oh, here's something you might know, is that a similar organization was created in real world, and after a real life near Earth object, they debate about naming the object after part of the title of this book.
The near Earth object in question is not natural.
Yeah, it's not Rendezvous with Rama, is it?
Yes, it is by Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh.
Yeah, we had Phil on to Take Me to Your Reader, and we talked about how to adapt it because there were rumors that Denis Villeneuve is going to do it. And then you and I talked about the book that was recommended to us as Rama Done Right.
That's right, yeah. I had no idea that it was influenced by the Tunguska event.
Yes.
Wow.
Which was a asteroid collision or asteroid breaking up in the upper atmosphere of the Earth, and it caused this big explosion across Russia, I believe, and spread across Europe as well. I believe an account of the Tunguska event is in the introduction of the novel, and a similar event in the year 2077 inspires the world to create the organization tasked with observing extraterrestrial phenomena.
Yes.
And that is the end of the quiz.
Wow. How did we do? Did we get them all?
I believe you got them all. I think you were stumped by Frankenstein a little bit, and
Yeah.
And Battle Los Angeles, too.
Yeah.
A little bit, yes.
But for that one, I plead total ignorance because I've never heard of it.
2010's American action movies. Thank you guys for having me.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you for putting that together. And it wasn't that fiendish, actually. We've had some terrible quizzes in the past that have totally stumped us.
Yes. And big shout out to Seth for helping me write much better hints for this one.
I'm glad he didn't lead you to doing terrible puns.
I believe a couple of the hints for the poison belt were fairly terrible puns. Don't hound me for more hints.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you, Peter.
Thank you, guys.
That's filled a hole in our podcast, a quiz that we don't have to write now because you've already done it for us. Now, shall we move on to past, present, and future?
Yeah, let's.
I have a present/past item, which is a new magazine called the Interrositor. Are you familiar with the word interrositor?
I am. Yeah, it came from a work which was adapted into a movie.
Yes.
This Island Earth.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. The one with the aliens with the very high foreheads. So this magazine is called The Interrositor, and it's a new magazine, and they publish new fiction. But alongside it, they also reprint stories from old pulp magazines. And part of their mission is to present them in a format which is friendly to the eyes. So it's in the form of a PDF. That initially made me a little bit a little bit anxious that, well, if you're trying to do something that's friendly to the eye, you probably don't want to do a PDF. You probably want to do an EPUB, because if people look at an EPUB, they can change the size of the text to suit them.
Right.
So I was initially a little bit dubious when I saw that they were using PDF. But when I actually downloaded it and loaded it onto my Kindle, I could see that they had gone to some trouble to make it readable, even in, grayscale e-ink. So it's not just suitable for computers and tablets. It is also just about suitable for Kindles and Nooks. Having said that, I would prefer it to be an EPUB. I would much prefer to be able to enlarge the type a little bit, because my eyes are not terribly good. But nevertheless, it's a decent magazine, and they've made some good efforts, and it's very well designed. And of all the PDFs I've ever tried to look at on my Kindle, this is the best looking one. It really is. Still not perfect, because PDFs don't really work on e-ink devices, but this is the best one I've seen, and there's some good fiction in there as well. So, and for the pulps, they haven't just reproduced the scans that you see all over the internet, the type that we always are looking at.
Right.
They've converted it. They've put it into what they consider to be a readable font. Again, I'd like to be able to change the font to suit me. Thank you very much. Nevertheless, I feel they've met me halfway, if you like. And it's a decent little magazine. So the Interocitor, I'll put a link to that on our show notes.
I'm a programmer by trade, and my hobbies tend to be programming related or science fiction related.
Yeah.
One of the things I found many years ago is this program called Calibre.
Yes.
And Calibre would be a perfect way to take, a PDF, especially if you have the source for it, and to easily make EPUBs and Kindle files available.
Yes. And I did think of just running it through that, just to see if the default settings would produce a decent output. But then I thought, no, this is something I want them to do. I would like the publisher to do this.
Yeah.
Because it then gives the reader the choice, really. Have you got any past, present, or future items?
I have two relatively past and present items to talk about. Last time we talked, I mentioned that the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame had their 2024 creators inducted.
Yes.
And that the creations would be announced, and those have been announced. Mm-hmm. They are the Black Panther, the overall character and all of its history from Marvel and right. Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, the Dragon Ball anime series.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. I remember Black Panther before it was a media franchise. I remember reading the Marvel comics years and years ago, and when I first discovered they were making a movie of Black Panther, I thought, really? Do they think this is a big enough thing? Of all the Marvel properties, I didn't think it was that well known by the general public. And then, of course, I saw the movie, and wow. I have another present item, which is another magazine. A bit predictable here. It's the return of Galaxy Science Fiction, which was a science fiction magazine that started in the 1950s, and it stuck around for a few decades. Then it went out of business, then it came back again, and it went out of business. I don't know how many different incarnations there have been, but there is now a new incarnation of Galaxy Science Fiction, which very much is trying to tie itself to that legacy. And there's some information in the first issue, which is free, that gives you the kind of the backstory of what Galaxy was. And it looks like it could be a significant new player in the short fiction, science fiction world.
Well, interesting.
The first issue is free. You can download it as a PDF. Future issues, it looks as if you have to subscribe. I didn't click on the subscribe button, but I'm pretty sure it's going to ask me to pay money for future issues. Have you got any more past, present, or future items?
Well, my friend Nisu, who participated in my quest to try and find someone who wanted to gatekeep science fiction and, utterly rejected the idea, sent us a message reminding me about the significance of August 29th, which, today is August 30th. So that was yesterday. It is the anniversary of when Skynet became self-aware.
Oh, yes. I saw a Facebook meme today that referred to the 29th, and it showed Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I gather that's it then.
Yeah. So yeah, we're 17 years beyond that point, and I hope we'll stay at that point. And given the current state of what people call artificial intelligence, I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. When you can't count the number of R's in the letter strawberry, I think we're safe for a while now, as long as we don't give it the keys to the nuclear launch codes.
But I still want them to program the 3 laws of robotics into ChatGPT, because there's no direct evidence that these AIs have ever been told what the laws are.
No. I think Hank Green still has the best description for what we call AI, and it is next word guessers.
Yeah.
So given a whole bunch of English works, they have figured out that they can reproduce things that resemble English with no checking of veracity or quality, and disrespecting the people whose works they stole illegally to create that body of work to train their devices on.
Yeah. But still, I for one welcome our new robot overlords. Just hedging my bets there.
Well, they do make very nice graphics.
They do. Where would a podcast be without some AI to generate some artwork for it? Actually, I just generated the artwork for today's.
Oh.
I used Adobe Firefly, which is a little bit more ethical than some of the AIs because it claims to have been trained on licensed imagery rather than just stuff found on the internet. But it's still got the foibles of all the other image generation AIs. I asked it to produce an image of a robot and a Martian doing a high five.
Oh.
And it gave me 2 robots. There's no sign of a Martian there at all. So anyway, are we done?
I think we are.
Good. Well, thanks once again to Peter Kuskie for joining us for our quiz. And thank you for listening. We're Phil Nichols and Colin Kuskie. Our music is from purpleplanet.com. And don't forget to visit our website at 101sf.blogspot.com. And you can find us on Facebook and also Blue Sky. I don't really know what Blue Sky is. Haven't really figured out what the advantage is, but we're on it. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.